So choices in games, you know them, you love them. It seems like when it comes to games, you either don't get any choices because it's a more linear game, do get choices which genuinely impact the story, or the more likely option, you're given choices so you think there's options, but in reality nothing changes, or if there are changes, they're very minimal. As such, when there's one of those games where choices really do matter and branch out in ways that can truly immerse you and make you feel like the game's a living, breathing universe, it almost always seems to succeed, or at the very least get a cult following, no matter how long or short, and no matter the genre. And so I really wanted to talk about this topic, and what better game to talk about when choices matter than Overboard. Overboard is a classic whodunit type of puzzle game where you're on a boat heading for America in the 1930s, and after murdering your husband by throwing him overboard, you must do your best to try and get away with murder and secure that life insurance policy. The game is styled akin to a visual novel game, but with an explorable map and a set timer where you have 8 hours in game to secure your innocence before you make it to the mainland. You can manipulate, frame, blackmail, commit more murder, all in an effort to get off scot-free. With dozens of choices, endings, and options, it's very much akin to something like the Stanley Parable, in that although the area and story is linear, the entire game is centered around the gameplay of choice. So, to start us off, let's go through the game's best ending. The game starts off with a small cutscene detailing the murder. Our husband Malcolm apparently did some pretty bad investments that financially screwed us over, and as such we're trying to start anew by sailing for New York. Standing together at the rail though, we tell him that there's dolphins down below, and push him overboard into the waters below. And with a scream, we wake up in our cabin. Before we can fully collect ourselves, the cabin boy is already knocking at our door to notify us of breakfast. When he comes inside, he immediately inquires about where our husband is. We say we haven't seen him since last night. We'll have to keep our story straight if we want to successfully get away with this. Heading straight to the upper deck to make sure no evidence was left from last night's fall, we quickly collect a dropped earring. Luckily, nobody found it up here before us. We'll head back down to snag a ball of sleeping pills as well as some items from our husband's jacket which was left in the smoking room, likely before his fall. Given last night wasn't very foggy, we decided to head up to the bridge and check in with the ship's commander to make sure they didn't see anything last night. Making our way there, we see Commander Anders, waving and quickly being let in. He seems nice enough, though he seems to inform us that he was on watch last night. Light breeze, no fog, relatively good visibility. He's not pulling any punches and hinting that he knows just what happened last night. Though the fact that he hasn't reported you yet is certainly odd. Why the hesitation? We also learned that a certain other person, Lady Armstrong, likes to take a stroll around at night and warns us that she has claws. Trying to win Anders over, we invite him over to our room once he's shifted off duty. As we pass by the hallway, we hear sobbing across the hall. In the room nearby is a woman named Carissa, and upon knocking, it doesn't take a genius to realize that she's seen something. Something she'd best stay quiet about. Though we don't exactly have time for this, as we have a rather personal meeting with Anders. As he gets up to wash his face, we steal his passkey, replacing it with a different key we found in our ex-husband's coat. Back with Clarissa, she's very upset and aggressive, but somehow we manage to talk her up deck. Instead of meeting with her though, we sneak into her room with the passkey and get into her drawers, finding poetry about her husband. Before we're noticed, we quickly run up deck to finally meet her like we said we would. We show Clarissa her own letter, claiming Malcolm gave it to us before he jumped. Given how inconsolable Clarissa was before, this convinced her that Malcolm jumped off the ledge out of guilt because he cheated on us with her. Meaning, lucky us, we've gaslit one of our possible witnesses that they committed the crime. Still having Lady Armstrong as a suspected witness, we head off to chat with her as well, finding her sitting alone at the boat's restaurant. She orders us both a martini, and so as we ask questions and she answers, we slip one of our handy dandy sleeping pills into her hand, slip it into our drink, and then swap our drinks while she isn't paying attention. With her being successfully sleeping pilled, we take our leave before it kicks in. Once she returns to her room and falls asleep, we use the pass key again to sneak inside and rifle through the drawers. Slipped inside of one of the books, there's a younger photo of what looks to be Commander Anders, at least upon first glance. Slipping into her pocket, we head off to the bridge again to show him. The way he reacts to it seems to indicate this was some form of blackmail that Lady H had on Anders. So, we give it to him. Like a good person. What, did you think I had bad morals just because I'm a murderer? Shame on you! Anyways, Anders recognizes this must have been really hard to get, and when we tell him that he deserves to be freed from her and whatever secret this photo represented, he takes it and rips it to shreds, throwing it overboard. Anders tells us that she's bound to have more, and reminds us that she might have seen us last night too, saying that the only way to be rid of her is to destroy her somehow. So we convince him to claim that he saw Lady H up on the deck, and that she was the one to throw her husband overboard. As time draws closer to reaching America, everyone is gathered gathered in the restaurant for an emergency meeting. Clarissa, still thinking it was her who caused the death, sits down, sobbing her little heart out, when Anders cracks a smile at the fact there's no accusation towards us at all. He misses seeing not us, but Lady H on deck. Though this surprises everyone, Clarissa quickly brightens up her tune, albeit still sobbing, that what she saw last night was Malcolm fall past her portside window and into the sea where he drowned. Miss Armstrong tries to fight back, saying she doesn't even have an alibi. However, us still having the letter Clarissa wrote to her husband uses that, claiming that she was trying to blackmail him about his cheating, and when Malcolm pushed back, threatening to expose Miss H, she threw him overboard. This is enough to convince everyone on deck, allowing for Lady Armstrong to be apprehended and swiftly sent to jail upon reaching land, ensuring our freedom, our life insurance payout, and not a loose end in sight. Woo, yeah, we committed murder. Now that whole ending might have been a little confusing and convoluted, but what you need to remember is that this game is built on repetition. The idea is that you keep replaying over and over to learn more and more things until you can piece them together for an ideal outcome. For example, you need to know to get your earrings right at the start of the run, otherwise this gentleman will take a stroll, find them first, and point out that you had to have been up deck at some point where the crime took place. Or if you don't get the sleeping pills, not only can you then not drug Miss Armstrong to get the blackmail on Commander Anders and then get his help framing her, but if there's any doubt on you for other things, then the cabin boy will discover the pills and claim that one of the symptoms on the back is mood swings and use that as a reason you may have committed the crime. Which all boils down to one of the important keystones of choices in games: reward. As you play most games, there's usually going to be extra little tidbits on the lore and story that you can find out by exploring and paying attention. However, most of the time this information is useless, and if it's not, then the game will often go out of its way to tell you about that piece of info on repeat, so the game journalists don't get confused. When you have to make a choice in games, usually whether you know a lot about the world doesn't matter too much, as, again, it's usually a non-choice or the illusion of choice or doesn't change much. However, good choices in gaming require reward for those who go out of their way to pay attention to the game's world and use their knowledge to make a good decision. When a choice encourages you to explore and learn, then it ensures that the player feels more like the game is a living, breathing world, and will make them want to search every nook and cranny. And although it's usually not to the extent of most choices matter types of games, you actually do this with most games, even ones where choice isn't explicitly a text option. Have you ever fought against an ice-based boss and thought, oh gee, I should maybe use fire? That is a reward-based choice. You took in the context that this is an ice-themed area, has an ice-themed boss, and knew that using fire, which would melt ice, would likely do more damage than a normal weapon. Reward in choices is something that is inherently engaging to the player and makes them feel more in tune with the world at large, and thus have more fun with your game. And in Overboard, where the whole game is nothing but choices, you see reward-based choice everywhere. In this ending, or really any ending, you can hear Clarissa crying in their room once they're in there, and can infer that she's probably crying about something. And once you know it's about your husband, other than knowing that she must have seen something, you can also infer that she and your husband might have been a little closer than you initially thought, which in turn rewards you, as using that information, the next reasonable step would be to get into her room somehow. And if your husband and her were a little too close, chances are your husband might have something of hers. And if you use Malcolm's key instead of the pass key, you learn that the key is to her room, rewarding you with more avenues to take with Clarissa. And of course, the option to find that letter, allowing you to manipulate her and the others further. This game is full of options like this, all of which intertwine, giving you a loop of seeking out information, using context to learn things, using those clues as hints for what to do or where to find more items, and then using that to unlock a new area or scene to seek more information from. But I also want to talk about another ending, the game's homicide ending, where you kill everyone you can. Once again, you wake up after killing your husband to the cabin boy. Instead of shooing him off though, we take a nearby dolphin paperweight and smash him over the head. The music stops instantly. It takes multiple attempts to slowly kick him under the bed, a long streak of blood following. Heading to the upper deck, we find Mr. Carstairs has gotten there before us, asking if we came up here looking for our diamond earring, which surprises him because he came up before us, hinting that we might have already came up here at one point. Suddenly, we point out that there's dolphins in the water, and when he denies it, keep insisting that there is something down there in the water, that he should see it. He should keep leaning, he should keep leaning forward, please, until... Wonder who Elisa is. Either way, as we leave, we catch a glimpse of the commander at the bridge, a clear view of what just occurred. We head down to Clarissa sobbing in their cabin, and similar to our other run, we knock and insist that she talks to us upstairs. Like last time, she tells us she saw him fall overboard past her window, though this time we ask where the porthole was, to which she leans over to show us. We shove her overboard. Turns out, however, that Miss Armstrong was eavesdropping. They don't seem too fearful or anything though, almost proud, which speaks on her morals. Insisting that we have no idea what she's talking about, we ask where she was standing, to which Miss H immediately goes over to stand where she was. Anyways, with that out of the way, we know that people will notice 4 whole people going missing, so we run to find one of the last remaining people, Subder Major. We talk much like the rest, and when enough time passes, Major asks if we've seen Mr. Carstairs, the man we threw overboard for finding our earring. We say we last saw him up deck, which is technically true, just leaving out a few things. With that, Subder Major goes up deck to try and find him. We follow, and lucky us, he's there over the railing. Simply pushing him over isn't the best idea, given he's an old soldier, but he does have a knife poking out of his back pocket. Looks just like a dolphin. Taking it, we stab him in the back, leaving him too weak to hoist himself up when we throw him overboard. Although, unlike the rest, he holds onto the railing for dear life, pleading with us. Sadistically, we make him lose his grip one by one before falling into the ocean floor. One more to go. Anders, who has finally had enough and makes his way down. We pick up the Major's knife again. Surprisingly, the commander puts up his hands. It's not hard to hit him some more fatally. He jolts upright, his arms slamming to either side of his body, and... Anders? What's the matter with you? Something's happening to him. Before my eyes, his skin is turning gray, his long, thin body is stretching and smoothing. I must be going mad. I'm going mad. I hate dolphins. He pivots on his heels, ramming into me. I tumble towards the rail. I try to catch myself, but my arms don't seem to move. He's behind me, the weight pushing me forward. We plunge together down into the teething waters below the ship and start to swim. Yeah, probably one of the weirdest endings I've ever seen in a game, but this genocide ending shows another main keystone of any game with good choices. Intention. Intention in choice should ideally ensure that the game is always generally aware of why a player may or may not be making a series of choices. More importantly, intent gives a way out to players who happen to make 1 or 2 wrong choices on accident, not by locking it off until a certain point, but by requiring certain bits of knowledge and ensuring that you're doing more than just a few mistakes, but actively going out of your way to commit to the choices. Sure, a lot of people may have had Carstairs find the earring, but most players are unlikely to kill Clarissa because we're actively told Armstrong is eavesdropping, and most people wouldn't have killed Carstairs because you have to confirm it over and over again. Not to mention you fail if you do it at a time when Anders isn't at the helm to not report you. Not to mention, in order to successfully pull it off, you need to kill the cabin boy right at the start of the run, as well as Subder Major right at the end. Neither of which you have any real reason to need to kill off. So both at the start and the end of your run, you have to explicitly do an action that a first playthrough player would be unlikely to do. A great example of intent-based choices in games is, of course, Undertale's Genocide route, which does a similar thing. You can't just kill every monster you see, you have to go out of your way to grind each and every area until a specific message. Even after nearly every enemy is a one-hit KO, and when it takes longer and longer to get an actual encounter to the point you're investing hours into just getting a few more points, no random player would get that ending unless they already knew what you had to do in advance, or beat the game before with another ending. Both of these require player intent, which is important in that the developer should keep in mind what the player is thinking upon choosing an option. What are they intending to do when deciding to pick this over the other options? Are they going along with a pattern? Are they doing it because of a hint earlier in the game? Are they just going off their gamer instincts like smashing cots in other people's homes? The baby ending from the Stanley Parable also uses this keystone of intention-based choice. After a certain point of the game, after choosing not to listen to the narrator for most of the game, the narrator will try to find you a game you will like, eventually creating a game where you must press a button to stop a baby from crawling into this fire. The narrator tells us that in order to fully get to the game, we must play it for at least 4 hours to truly experience the art of it, which most took as a joke, pressing it for a few seconds and then letting the baby die, where the narrator will call you heartless. However, if you take the time to actually sit there for 4 hours, which you can't just do an auto clicker for because halfway in they introduce another button further away with a puppy, then you are rewarded with a new ending. Most players aren't going to take this seriously upon first getting here, and those who decide to do this have to set aside 4 whole hours of their time, of which, if they mess up, they have to start from the beginning. In order to get this ending, you have to intend on wasting 4 hours of your time. If you want to get genocide, you have to intend on grinding even when you have no feasible reason to. If you want to get quintuple homicide, you need to intend to go out of your way to kill everyone, even though it's not feasible for your goal of getting away with murder to commit more. Using both reward and intention is both an extremely important aspect of designing choices in games if you want your choices and possibly world to not feel hollow. Mainly because with both of these things, you need to really know your audience and get into your players' heads. If you're able to predict what they are going to do, then you can properly read their intentions and reward them for going above what they need to do, and reasoning with what you give them. Both of which Overboard does masterfully. Though with how simple these two aspects of game design may seem on the outside, you may be asking why all games don't do this. Why can't all games have good choices? Why do most developers instead go down the route of making all choices do roughly the same thing, or making consequences boil down to a single line of dialogue and that's that? Well, this is the part where we talk about the gaming industry as a whole, because spoiler warning, games are hard! With AAA games, developers are crunched for time and rarely have the time or opportunity to test all avenues of the game. For every choice and branching path the game has, the more they need to test. And the more they need to test, the less time they have to get the game done. And with a CEO leaning over your shoulder, there's a high chance that you're going to be left with either an unplayable game with lots of choices, or you'll have a minimally less buggy game with no choices. And that's assuming the developers get to add those choices and branching paths. When it comes to corporation, there's a long list of people that every little thing has to be checked and approved by. And with choices, the amount of bells and whistles that have to be passed up to upper management quadruples. That's why when it comes to choices, they eventually just wind up as a minor dialogue change or an illusion of choice where the same thing happens, or it just simply ends up with the Skyrim effect where it's only used in smaller scale quests that don't matter for the story at large. With indie developers, although you no longer have a manager looking at your kneecaps and demanding things be removed or changed, you no longer have the support of a team, nor do you have a massive budget behind you. Meaning with every new choice, you have nobody to stop you from making an infinitely large scope, far exceeding what the game could possibly handle. And the larger the scope of the game is, the less likely it will get done, as it may become irrelevant, or the dev burns out, or they get a better idea, or they run out of money or time, or have to deal with something going on with their own life, leaving the game to die in favor of, well, life. As such, you'll only really see good choice being used minimally by smart developers that know where to best place them, or you'll have the occasional smaller scope game built entirely around it. Or you have that one rare developer that's just super cracked and somehow makes a game centered around choices that isn't just text while still taking everything into account. Toby Fox! Either way, although Overboard is a short game, so long as you keep coming back to see its endings, you will be enamored by its mastery of choice in game design. If you're planning on making a game that has choices, big or small, I'd strongly advise giving the game a look or buying it off of Steam. I only covered 2 of the game's endings, but the masterclass doesn't stop there, as there's a ton of examples I left out that you should really see for yourself if you have any interest in creating a game someday. Anywho, that's all I have this time around. My motherboard is still fried, so I probably won't be able to work on as many videos until they send it back to me. Plus, I have no access to my end screen stuff or PNGs right now, so it might be a bit before you see those again. I'm also still super upset because I was going to do a different video for this one, but while I was gathering footage of Overwatch 2, it killed my computer. So I think Blizzard has a hit out on me because I think it knows I'm gonna show why an indie game did it better. So look forward to that. I think it's time I head out. Bye everyone.